from 5 to 8 million people in the next few decades. They need to live somewhere. Some will choose to live here in Moreland. It's a great place to live. Moreland Council knows the challenges and opportunities that this increase in population brings. With 43,000 more people living here by 2036, there are important things to consider, plan for and act on. Things like housing, transport, our open spaces, and managing the impacts of construction activity. 43,000 new people, or around 18,000 new households, means taller buildings or more buildings on existing blocks. This is not what many of us are used to, but lifestyles are changing and we need to adapt. We want to encourage these taller buildings to be located near public transport routes and where daily needs like shopping and community services are just a walk away. This way, more people won't mean lots more traffic and congestion. More flexible use of our industrial land can help too. Some land can change to accommodate new work and local jobs, and some can provide housing for more people. We are also looking at ways that some housing can remain more affordable. Council is actively buying property to improve and purchase new parks and open spaces for all residents to enjoy. This is about thoughtful planning for a great future for everyone. The things we love, the vibrant and thriving shopping areas, our great heritage areas, will still be here. But changes need to happen. We want to make sure that any development is of high quality and improves livability. So we're making decisions based on research, data, world's best practice and consultation with the community. Together, we can continue to make Moreland a great place to live for our long-term residents, our new arrivals and for those who'd like to live here in the future. Moreland, one community, proudly diverse.
Morelanders, we know you've had enough of dump rubbish. It's messy, disruptive, unsafe, and it's illegal. Yes, dumping rubbish is illegal. Last year it cost Moreland more than $1 million to pick up illegally dumped rubbish. We're using up your money and our resources every time we pick up this garbage. It's the duty of every good citizen of Moreland to report rubbish dumpers. Let us know if you see anything suspicious. Send us a photo, a registration number, or a physical description of the villain. Every small piece of information can contribute to bringing justice to our city. And as for the dumpers, know this. With the help of our community, we will find you and we will prosecute you.
So the Eco House was a normal suburban house. It was going to be demolished, but instead we moved it to series, and now people can visit and find out how to make their lives more sustainably. So recently we renovated the Eco House to be fully electrical. By being entirely electrical, we can power our whole house with solar power and other forms of renewable power. We've installed heat pumps for heating and cooling. We've got a lot of really good insulation and a new electric car. We've got really good seals around all the doors and windows, rainwater collection for our garden, a battery to store solar power. If you don't have the capacity to install solar yourself, like you're a renter or you don't have the right kind of roof space, you can still be renewably powered. All you have to do is make sure that when you buy electricity from your power company, that you're buying renewable electricity.
I'm Jan, I live in Brunswick East, and I've used Positive Charge to help me find someone to draft-proof my house. Positive Charge have been fantastic. They put me in touch with the company. I asked them to do initially the doors. Later I got them to come back and do the caulking of every gap in the house. I think it's really important to have draft-proofing done because it's one of the major ways that we lose heat from houses. I save on my gas heating, so that benefits me financially, and it's much more comfortable not having any drafts in the house. I would definitely recommend others getting it done, and in fact both of my daughters have had it done through Positive Charge at their houses, and they're very happy with it.
Good evening, councillors, members of the gallery, and to our viewers live streaming tonight's meeting. My name is Councillor Natalie Abood, and I am the chairperson of the council meeting for planning and related matters. It is my pleasure to welcome you to tonight's meeting. Our meeting is being held on the traditional country of the Wurundjeri people, and I acknowledge them as the traditional owners. I would also like to pay my respects to their elders, past, present and emerging, and to elders from other communities who may be here today. I acknowledge that currently many Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people call Moreland home. I also acknowledge that the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people never ceded sovereignty of their lands and have continuously cared for their country for over 60,000 years as the world's oldest living culture. Members of the gallery, please note that this planning and related matters meeting is being recorded and web streamed live to Council's website and Facebook. The recording will also be available as video on demand. Gallery attendees are advised that they will be recorded during the meeting. Councillors, just as a reminder that in line with the adopted councillor conduct principles as outlined in the Councillor Code of Conduct, councillors should ensure that they conduct themselves in the meeting with integrity, impartially exercise their responsibilities in the interest of the local community and not improperly seek to confer or advantage any person. This behaviour will support principles for leadership and good governance that secures public confidence in the office of councillor. Members of the gallery, in the event of an emergency or disruption, we may be required to take action to ensure the safety of attendees. Please follow the directions issued by council staff and security officers. Thank you for your understanding and cooperation. I'd like to introduce the other councillors in attendance tonight. Councillor Sue Bolton. Councillor Helen Davidson.
Good evening.
Councillor Jess Dorney.
Evening.
Councillor Alia Farnley.
Evening.
Councillor Dale Martin. Councillor Lambros Tapanos. And Councillor Oscar Yildiz. The officers in attendance tonight are the Acting Group Manager of City Development, Mark Hughes, to my left. Coordinator of City Development, Darren Camilleri. Acting Planning Coordinator, Lachlan McGowan. So I have listed here. Andy Wilson, Saskia Hunter, and Ali, can't remember your name. Brown, Ali Brown. Welcome everyone. Thank you for your help. Councillors, are there any apologies from fellow councillors for tonight's meeting?
I have an apology from Councillor Kavanagh.
Thank you very much. So we have an apology from Councillor Kavanagh, which has been put forward by Councillor Davidson, and I'm happy to second that. So we'll vote on accepting. Yep, they're leave of absence, so I'll go to that. Thanks. So just vote on accepting the apology of Councillor Kavanagh. Those in favour? Declare that carried. Councillors, I also note that leave of absence has been granted to Councillor Carly Hannon from the 11th of April 2019 to the 12th of August 2019, and to Councillor Riley from the 14th of April 2019 to the 27th of April 2019. Are there currently any further requests for leaves of absence? No? So I'll now move to the adoption of the minutes. Can I have a motion, please, to adopt the minutes from Councillor Davidson? And Councillor Bolton has seconded. Is there any discussion regarding the adoption of the minutes from the previous meeting? No? I'll put that to the vote. All those in favour? Against? I'll declare that carried. I'll now ask for declaration of interest and or conflicts of interest. Councillors, are there any interests or conflicts of interest to declare?
Yes, I'd like to declare a conflict of interest to be exempt from voting on DCF 2018, item 2.
Thank you. Councillor, I'll ask you to leave the chamber before this item is considered and to return after the item has been considered and voted on. So if there are no other conflicts of interest, I'll move on to the meeting. I'd like to give you an outline of how the planning and related matters meeting will run this evening. The relevant planner will introduce the report and officer's recommendation. Then I will give any objectors the opportunity to move to the lectern to make their submission. After this time, the applicant will be given the opportunity to speak. If you are making a submission, please clearly state your name and address for the record. You are requested to present viewpoints clearly and concisely on why you support or oppose the planning application. Please do not repeat what earlier speakers have said and keep the discussion focused on relevant issues and points not previously raised. If you are opposed to the planning application, would you please inform the meeting why you're opposed and suggest an alternative approach which would satisfy your concerns? Please use this opportunity to focus on your concerns rather than matters of detail in the officer's report. Please note that there is a 3-minute limit for each speaker, but as chairperson, I reserve the right to increase or reduce the time available to any speaker. So I'll now move to the presentation of the reports, and the first report we have this evening is DCF 2719, 11 Pascoe Street, Pascoe Vale, Planning Permit Application MPS 2018-533. Thank you.
Thank you. This is an application at 11 Pascoe Street in Pascoe Vale. It's an application for a 3-storey mixed-use building. The application is located within a local centre, shown here on the map. This is an area that's identified for incremental change. The subject site is located within the Commercial 1 zone. To the rear of the site is the neighbourhood residential zone. On the opposite side of the site, there is a school, and the site adjoins the road zone Category 1 as well. The site's also affected by a special building overlay, which relates to flooding. This is an aerial image of the subject site. You can see that along this strip of shops, quite a few of the sites have been developed already. In particular, 2 sites adjoining to the east and west of the subject site have been developed. This is the subject site itself as viewed from Pascoe Street. As you can see, there's some single-storey buildings on the site with a high solid front fence. You can also see a little bit on the right-hand side of the image that there's a number of apartments of adjoining sites that look out over this site. These are the 2 buildings that adjoin the site. 15 Pascoe Street adjoins the site to the west. That's a 5-storey apartment building. To the east is 9 Pascoe Street, a 3-storey apartment building. The proposal is for a 3-storey building with 7 dwellings and a shop. The application also seeks a reduction of car parking of 3 spaces. 2 of those spaces are associated with the shop, 1 space associated with one of the dwellings. In terms of the layout of the development, it's a bit hard to see here, but there's a shop that fronts the street. Naturally, the dwellings are in a sort of townhouse typology with car parking access along the western side, pedestrian access along the eastern side. At first floor, you have your main living spaces with the main view and balconies facing west. You can see here that the setbacks from the side boundaries are more or less consistent with the setbacks of the neighbouring properties, if not greater. And then at the top floor, there's some separation between the dwellings, which we say helps to reduce the visual bulk impact of the development. There's also a recommended permit condition to increase a setback of one of the dwellings, shown here circled in red, just to push that back in line with the other bedrooms on that level. In terms of consultation, the application was advertised. 16 objections were received. Main issues related to car parking, traffic, drainage, and loss of daylight. It's also noted that 15 of the objections were from residents or occupiers of the development at 15 Pascoe Street, and 1 objection from someone at 9 Pascoe Street. Planning information and discussion meeting was organised on 20th of February 2019. However, no objectors attended. Key considerations for this application are the presentation to Pascoe Street. We say this presents well to Pascoe Street, as you saw in the 3D image before. There's a good mix of materials. There's a textured brick proposed to the facade, a planter that's built into the ground of the facade as well. The reduction of car parking is a key consideration. The application has been reviewed by Council's traffic engineers and is supported by them. One of the recommended conditions also seeks to add an additional bicycle parking space to the footpath. There's also 1 crossover being removed as part of this application, which will increase the supply of on-street car parking by 1. The visual bulk is also a key consideration. We say that has been addressed by the permit condition increasing that setback, as discussed previously. There's also a number of recommended conditions addressing some overlooking concerns and requiring additional screening. Recommendation is for approval subject to conditions. The key conditions, as I've discussed previously, the increased setback of one of the dwellings, the bicycle parking on the footpath, and some screening to address overlooking concerns. Thank you.
Thank you, Lachlan. Are there any objectors or submitters who would like to speak in support or not of this application? No? Does the applicant or a representative for the applicant wish to speak? No. Councillors, do you have any questions? Ultimately, just to put to officers because we have no applicant or objectors. Okay, I need to ask for a motion regarding this application, please. Councillor Martin?
Yep, so I'm happy to move the officer recommendation with just a slight amendment to add in an additional bike parking and also to ensure that the building at the front is fully accessible.
Thank you. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Davidson?
I guess with this application, it's quite clear. I mean, there's no objectors in the gallery and the applicant didn't even bother turning up. There were no objectors that attended the PID either. So, and thanks to Councillor Yildiz for attending the PID. I think the recommendations here, the additional screening, the tree protections, the increased setbacks, all sort of address some of the concerns. I also think if you look, it's in a commercial 1 zone, it's in that spot. There was always going to be this sort of development of this sort of density. And so, you know, with the brick facade and a couple of other sort of nice features, I think that this is a development that is appropriate for that position. So I'm happy to support it with those minor amendments.
Thank you, Councillor Martin. Councillor Davidson, as the seconder, would you like to speak?
Just very briefly, I'm very supportive of this application. I think that I've really seen Pascoe Street flourish quite a lot with these developments, that this one really fits into the neighbourhood character quite well. There's some lovely little cafes down beneath the residential apartments, and it's close to the golf course, close to open space. It's the kind of development that we would want to see in this particular location.
Thank you, Councillor Davidson. Councillors, are there any speakers against the motion? I think I can probably just put that to the vote then. So all those in favour? Against? I declare that carried. The next item we have this evening is DCF 2819, 216 Albion Street, Brunswick, planning application, MPS 2012 848C. If you would like to declare the conflict and... Oh, sorry. I need to get the next steps from you. Sorry, I jumped ahead.
Sorry.
Thank you. So fast.
The next steps for 11 Pascoe Street, Council has decided to issue a notice of decision subject to conditions. Any objectors will have a right to appeal within 28 days. The applicant may appeal to VCAT within 60 days.
Thank you. You look as shocked as I felt. I think it's the first time it's ever happened. Okay, thank you. We can now move on. So DCF 2819, 216 Albion Street, Brunswick, planning application, MPF 2012 848C.
Okay. Councillors, I'll note that I have not yet participated in any discussions regarding this matter. I believe I have a conflicting personal interest on this item as I've engaged the architect involved in the development for a private matter and therefore may be perceived as having too close a connection with that firm. On balance, I believe it's not appropriate for me to be involved in this decision. I therefore seek council's consent to be exempt from this item.
Thank you, Councillor Dorney. So, do we need a motion to accept? Yeah. What?
I don't think we
No,
need a
I didn't
motion.
think so either.
You just go.
If you're asking me to exempt, she's just declaring conflict, it's fine.
No, yeah. We'll come and get you.
Change the minutes.
Yeah, you don't have to get permission.
Completely thrown. So I'll move to the officers to present the report, please.
Thank you. This is an application for a 9-storey mixed-use building at 216 Albion Street in Brunswick. This is actually an amendment to an existing permit. The existing permit allowed a 6-storey mixed-use building, but it's basically a complete redesign of the building. Subject site is located in the Brunswick Activity Centre. This is where we expect to see significant housing growth. The site is zoned Commercial 1. To the north, there is industrial zone land. Immediately to the west is also industrial zone land, but then slightly further west is residential land. Immediately adjoining the site to the west also is Public Use Zone 4, which contains the upfield corridor and also the upfield shared bike path. Subject site is also covered by the Design and Development Overlay, Schedule 18. This sets out some planning controls for the site, most relevant of which are preferred street wall height of 9 to 12 metres, which this proposal complies with, and a preferred maximum building height of 19 metres, which this proposal exceeds. This is the subject site here. As I mentioned before, it's adjacent to upfield train line. Anstey Station adjoins the site, as well as the upfield bike path along its western boundary. It's worth noting also that to the south, on the opposite side of Laneway, there's another apartment building that has been developed. And to the north there, you can see the industrial zone land, which currently contains some warehouse-type buildings. This is the subject site on the left-hand side of this image here. On the right is the station, Anstey Station building. Separating the two is the upfield bike path. As I mentioned earlier, there's an existing approved planning permit on the subject site. This allows a 6-storey mixed-use building with a height of 19.9 metres, 41 dwellings, 2 shops and a cafe, 17 car parking spaces, 52 bicycle parking spaces and a 7.0 NATAS rating. By comparison, the proposal is for a 9-storey mixed-use building at a height of 27.4 metres. The actual 9th storey can't be seen in this image here. It's actually a very small room attached to the lift well, which provides access to the rooftop communal open spaces. It's generally not visible from this immediately surrounding area. This proposed development includes 54 dwellings, 2 offices and 2 cafes at ground level. There's no car parking proposed for this development, but 147 bicycle parking spaces are proposed, and there's a 7.5 NATAS average rating. This image here shows the height of the building relative to the approved height. So this is the western elevation. If you have good eyesight, you're going to see a red dashed line that shows the height of the existing approval. So you can see here at the Albion Street end of the site, the proposal is approximately 1.5 stories higher than the existing approval. Towards the rear of the site, it's approximately 2.5 stories higher than the existing approval. And then in that red circle there, that's the extent of the 9th level. Despite being higher, the proposal will actually have less of an amenity impact on the adjoining apartment building or neighbouring apartment building to the south. It's set back further from its southern boundary. It will allow more daylight, more sunlight and a greater outlook to those neighbouring apartments. In terms of the interface with the bike path, the proposal is set back at ground level to provide additional pedestrian space. There's also a pedestrian laneway connection linking the upfield bike path and the existing laneway at the rear of the site. You'll see here in the bottom left image that the laneway connection was proposed to be only single height. The applicant has agreed to increase the height of that space to make it a double height space to improve the amenity of that laneway connection. The application was advertised and 5 objections were received. The main issues related to height, neighbourhood character, car parking and traffic overlooking and overshadowing. Planning information and discussion meeting has not been held for this application. Instead, the developer has contacted all objectors with an offer to discuss the proposal. Following this process, one objection has been withdrawn, and concept plans have also been prepared, showing additional vegetated screening to some of the west-facing balconies to respond to some of the objector concerns. In terms of the key planning considerations, the first one is whether the additional building height is acceptable. I've talked to this a little bit already in terms of the impact on the neighbouring apartment building to the south. We say also there's some contextual justification for this height. It's within the range of heights anticipated for the Brunswick Activity Centre. And the most sensitive interface is really that apartment building to the south, where the impact on this development will be less than the current approval. Also relevant is the impact of providing no on-site car parking. The applicant has submitted a traffic report, which has been reviewed by Council's traffic engineers and supported. The site is ideally suited next to a train station, provides a significant number of bicycle parking spaces. There's also a number of car share options in the immediately surrounding area. In terms of the interface with the upfield bike path, we've already discussed this somewhat. There's also recommended permit conditions to require lighting to that space between dusk and dawn. And finally, the internal amenity of the apartments is of a high quality and there's a high degree of compliance with the better apartment design standards. The recommendation is to issue a notice of decision to grant an amended planning permit. The key conditions, and remembering this is an amendment, most of the conditions are substantially modified to reflect current drafting conditions. There's a Section 173 agreement to ensure public access to the setback from the upfield bike path and also that pedestrian connection. As I mentioned before, a requirement for lighting to those areas and also the agreement of the applicant to increase the height of that laneway connection. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any objectors or submitters who'd like to speak? Does the applicant or a representative of the applicant wish to speak? Oh, objecting?
Yeah, no, support.
Oh, well, as a submitter, please come forward and present your case. Mr. Dolby, thank you.
This is an area that I spent several decades around. My name's Nick Dolby, Holbrook Crescent, West Brunswick. I used Anstey Station. I have used Anstey Station a lot. I've used the Edinburgh Castle on the Corner Hotel on occasion. I've used the tram stop nearby. I know the area very well. Do I think this building is a good design for the area? Yes, I do, but I won't talk about that. I'll talk about two issues, studio apartments and the transport amenity. The studio apartments, I'll remind you, yes, people talk about dog boxes, but may I remind you that we in Australia live in the largest dwellings in the world in terms of floor space. There is no other country in the world that has larger dwellings than we do. To have a small studio apartment, to live in minimal standards, to live with less clutter. What was it? Tiny homes. There's a movement of people pushing tiny homes and so on. These are what these studio apartments are. These are perfectly valid for Brunswick. They will be lovely places to live in. Moving on to the transport considerations. Gosh, sorry, are we going to have a developer donating land to the upfield shared path so that the upfield shared path at one of its bottlenecks is going to get wider? That's a very win-win for me. The improvement of the pedestrian amenity by providing the laneway connection is also a strong win for me. So certainly for people who feel that there may be a pedestrian and bicycle congestion in the area, I hope so. I hope there is pedestrian and bicycle congestion in the area because it'll mean there's less car congestion in the area. Thanks, that's all.
Thank you, Mr. Dolby. An applicant or representative of the applicant?
Good evening, Mayor. Good evening, councillors. I'm Jeremy McLeod from Breath Architecture. This is what we're calling Nightingale Anstey. It's the latest of our Nightingale projects. Nightingale exists, as you probably well know, to revolutionise the way we live together. Nightingale's a triple bottom line housing project. It's delivered housing at cost. The tile house apartments in this building, our sale price on that is $200,000, and we've done a lot of work with Bank Australia to be able to make those only available to first home buyers. We've worked incredibly hard to think about how this building fits in with the urban environment, and also to work closely with the objectors to ask them what it is that they actually need. And we started by meeting with the residents immediately to the south in the Nightingale 1 building, presenting the existing planning permit to them and offering them two other options. And the building that you're seeing before you now is one of those two other options, which talks about increasing the distance from this new building to their building, and then opening up that laneway at the back to plant some deep root planting trees in there, and then open that up to the bike path so that we can actually have some pedestrian movement through there, and then put an active space downstairs that will actually mean that place is surveilled, that it's used, that it's interesting, that it's engaging. We have big hopes for this, and you can see that we've tried to deal with the interface to the bike path, also by giving deep root planting on those edges to be able to put some big trees there between what could be an elevated rail immediately adjoining our building. You know what we've done with the Commons, and you know what we've done with Nightingale 1, and we hope that this is an evolution to make it better. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillors, do you have any questions? Councillor Martin?
I have one question. It was very close to our design excellence scorecard. Was it in consideration, the scorecard?
We actually did put this through the design excellence scorecard mechanism, and we ran it through. And I think that the only thing that, the reason that we didn't submit it was about the BESS ratings, which is something that, I've been talking to VCAT and VPLA, and in fact to Jan Talako, the guy that wrote BESS, about how that measures internal amenity, particularly to bedrooms.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Tapanos?
Yeah, I'm seeing a substantial sort of increase in the heights, and also due to dwelling numbers in the office space, which the office space at least I think is quite welcome. But I was wondering, what is the allocation under the planning scheme for car parks for a development of this size? I noticed that the waiver is to zero, but how much car parks are under the current planning scheme required for an application of this size? I'll find in the report.
I can answer that.
I think it says 70.
70 spaces. It's on
it's on page
18
54.
of the report.
Councillor Tapanos, could I talk to that for a minute?
Sure.
That's up to the mayor, not me.
Yep.
Is that okay? So the reason that Craig Pearce from the Traffic Department would actually agree to this is because the only access to this site is from the laneway off Florence Street. So because Albion Street is right next to the upfield rail crossing there, Moreland's traffic position was that we can't bring cars in off Albion Street because it's too busy running east-west. We would have to bring cars in down Florence Street, which is earmarked under the 2004 structure plan as being a major pedestrian thoroughfare. And there's just been a permit application that's gone through a compulsory conference at VCAT immediately to the east of this site with 77 cars in there. There's 7 townhouses immediately to the southeast of this site with 7 cars in it, and then there's a development immediately to the south of this with 18 cars in it. So between all of those developments, there's about 100 cars coming down Albion Street, turning right into Bree Street, turning right again into Florence Street, which is meant to be a pedestrian thoroughfare. Then those 100 cars are turning down a 70-metre long bluestone lane to come down and take a right turn. It's only 3.5 metres wide to go into their car spaces, car lift and car stackers. We think that bringing cars is untenable. We don't know how that's going to be managed, and we think that the answer here, right next to the Anstey train station, right next to the bike path, is actually to use active transport.
If I can just ask something as well. Nightingale and the Commons have also pretty significant car park waivers. I was just wondering if you, as the developer of these buildings with the significant car park waivers, have found that the owners of the building have run into any problems not being able to have cars, or have they just got along and been able to adjust living without cars in those developments as planned?
Yeah, so really good question. In the Commons, I live in the Commons. When people first moved into the Commons, there was a large number of cars that came. I think 70% of residents had cars. And then every year there was a survey done through the building. At year 3, there was 11% of people in the Commons had cars, and in our first planning permit application from the Commons, the intent was to reduce car ownership to 10%, and so we were at 11%. I think that what's happened in the Commons in recent times is that some of the apartments have been resold to older downsizers, and a couple of those have brought cars with them. And I think that the real estate agents selling those cars hasn't been transparent about the fact that they'll never get a permit for parking on the street. And I think that those residents are finding out now. And so what those residents have done is that they've leased spaces on top of the Brunswick market for $600 a year, I think. And then in Nightingale 1, there's an electrician and an architect, and they lease spaces in the Wilkinson and Geox, the two buildings on Breeze Street, with and so we've done parking audits of those buildings that have about 30% vacancies in them. And so they're leasing spaces, secure spaces in there. And then obviously the intent there's lots of Go-Gets there. And with Nightingale, we've got a partnership with Go-Get where all of our residents get a premium membership worth $360 a year for free if you live in a Nightingale building, which means that you can drive for $7.90 an hour, including your petrol. And Nightingale Village has got 15 new EVs going in there.
Okay, great. Thank you. Does anyone else have any other questions? Ali?
Sorry, one more. Great to see a lot of good features of this application in terms of improved from the existing one. 3-bedroom apartments are certainly welcome, encouraging a mix of different type of residents. One thing that concerns me is the lack of office space. Given you've got, a lot of say in terms of a lot of the development in this area, I'm concerned that we're not really leaving behind space for people to live local and work locally, and instead we're still having to transport people in and out of the CBD. This is a prime opportunity in a great spot for office space. Why don't you take up that opportunity to given you're increasing to 8 stories, to increase the office space?
I think that there's a couple of answers to that, councillor, but firstly, I agree with you wholeheartedly that I think that we've got to make sure that we keep employment, where we live and work. And I think that the first answer, and probably the simplest, is that Nightingale Housing's mission is to deliver triple bottom line housing and to deliver affordable, carbon neutral housing. That's our mission. Similar to Nightingale Village, when we acquired this site, we paid through the nose for it. So we paid $4.5 million for this site. We've kept about the same amount of saleable area, and we've made it taller to be able to push back from the west and from the south to be able to provide better urban amenity. To go higher costs us more. To build something that's 7.5 stars that's carbon neutral costs us more. And we're constantly trying to get the cost of equity down to be able to do that. We're currently looking at, so Nightingale 1 was sold at about $8,100 a square metre. Nightingale Anstey currently looks like it's going to be sold at about $7,900 a square metre. So it looks like it's going to be sold cheaper than Nightingale 1 4 years on. And so one of our big challenges is housing affordability and first home buyers. And so the tile house apartments, we only sell to first home buyers. The challenge for us is if we put office space in that area, our advice has been that we can sell that office space for about $4,000, $4,500 a square metre. And so what that does is it forces us to subsidise the construction of the office space or the price of the land by pushing up the price of all the apartments. So if we'd got the land cheaper, maybe we could do that. But the issue for us is the competing interests, I guess. And the other thing is that what we're finding is that it's really difficult for us to find tenants to come and take these spaces. So we're working with organisations like Ethical Property Australia, values-aligned tenants, for example. So a cafe tenancy that agrees to operate carbon neutrally, that won't have any gas, that will do everything on induction cooktops, and they're tough to find. And then you're telling an office space that they can come and work there, but they've got to naturally ventilate their office space. It's challenging for us. So we hope to be able to build a bigger register of commercial tenants that want to come with us. But at the moment, like to find the tenants for Nightingale 1, well, like I think that we personally met with 24 different tenant groups to find the right tenants for Nightingale 1, and there's really only 2 tenants there. So in this instance, we've got 4, yeah. So it's a challenge, but I think we're getting better at that.
Thank you. Any other questions? I need a motion from councillors, please. I'm happy to put it from the chair. Councillor Farnley, good for you. So the officer's recommendation?
Yeah.
Yep. And I need a seconder, please. Councillor Yildiz. Would you like to speak to the proposal, Councillor Farnley?
I think enough discussion has taken place between the questions and the officer's presentation, but we have an application here to amend existing plans. Overall, I think there's an improvement to the existing plans in terms of creating more light to the dwellings on the south and providing public space for people along the bike path in terms of more public space. So overall, I'm quite supportive of the improvements to the amended plans.
Thank you, Councillor Farnley. Councillor Yildiz? No? Are there any councillors who would like to speak against the motion? Councillor Tapanos.
Yeah. Can I start by saying there's a lot of great features here, and of course it's an excellent design response with its ESD and everything it aims to achieve. Likewise have been the previous developments in Nightingale and the Commons. I do think that this one is too high for the location that it's at. I think 9 stories, even if you call it at 8 stories, is still too high for its location off Sydney Road. If you have a look at it, for me, I think it overshadows the station, the bike path, and Florence Street significantly. And I think a lot of that is because of heights. Yes, it would be worse if those setbacks weren't there, but nonetheless, I still think it's an imposing structure. And for me, it says that it's an overdevelopment. I understand the development pressures in the current market, but that doesn't mean, in my view, that developers should come back and say we now need more heights. We need more to be able to make these projects stack up. For me, to go from 6 stories to 9 stories is excessive. To go from, I would say as well, in this area, I think car parking is a problem. I do accept that it's difficult on this site, and I would be happy with 0 car parking on this site because of that difficulty. It is a matter of getting the right balance in regards to per application, whether it's possible and what that will do to the surrounding area. And I do accept the outcome that here it's not possible. But having said that, this developer in particular has probably done the bulk of the construction in this block, and every development is 0 car park except for the last one. So I think that it's adding pressure on the strip in that area. And if you speak to residents just on the other side of the railway line in Orient Grove, they will tell you that car parking is at a premium, but they can't get the car parking in their street, that it's almost impossible to find a spot, but also the traffic chaos that is created by cars turning in and then turning out. It's almost become an unofficial car park that's at capacity 24/7. And I think that what is happening is part of that is traffic coming to jump on the train, but part of it is also residents that live in these apartments. So I accept that many of the residents may not have a car, but they certainly would have visitors. And for a visitor, the best place to park is in the surrounding residential streets. And I think that is then creating an excessive burden in Frederick Street, in Orient Grove, and in those areas, which is slightly unfair. So overall, for me, it screams an overdevelopment by at least 2 levels. And I think if 2 levels were reduced, that would be a better application. It would eliminate some of the car parking pressures slightly, and it would also create less visual bulk and more light in public areas like the station and Florence Street and the bike path.
Thank you, Councillor Tapanos. Are there any speakers who would like to speak in favour of the motion? Councillor Martin?
Yes, and I thank my fellow councillor for pointing out that the previous application on the site was much worse than the current one before us. I also echo the statements that traffic chaos is caused by cars turning in and out of these developments. I couldn't agree more. I think this is a far superior outcome. We need to see density in areas where it is appropriate, areas where there is excellent access to public transport. Nobody, not even council officers, want to see hundreds of cars turning down a 70-metre laneway, going back and forth, causing traffic chaos in our city. What we see here is a really great application, 7.5-star neighbours. I mean, the separation between this building and the previous one, the separation between buildings almost doubles, allowing much more light into the private amenity of the people that are already living there. And you know, if you actually think, you know, what are we trying to do in the city? Are we trying to create design excellence? Are we trying to have the best possible amenity for residents? Then this application, it speaks to it. You heard before, it almost met our design excellence scorecard, the benchmark of which no developer has met in our city thus far, and still looking forward to a developer meeting our design excellence scorecard at some point. You know, I think the additional benefits, the laneway connections, the fact that there's conditioned green travel plans, and also the fact that our upfield bike path gets additional space. There's additional lighting going in. You know, the amenity for all residents surrounding this site is going to improve, and it is far superior than the previous application. And so I fully support this application, and I fully support density in areas where we have excellent public transport.
Thank you, Councillor Martin. Are there any... Councillor Bolton?
I'd like to speak against this application, not for the environmental reasons, not for a whole lot of reasons, but purely on the basis of height. I feel, well, this will be 7.5 metres higher than the preferred height limits, which were reached as a result of, you know, 8 years or so of public consultation. I don't see why it's not possible to bring in a design like this at the actual height. I mean, I think this starts to be, you know, profit gouging, in my opinion. I think there shouldn't really be, we shouldn't have a trade-off mentality of, you know, you only get these good features if you trade off height. I think if there's a desire to, you know, constantly exceed the height limits, then there should be some new public consultation in Moreland to see if people want to maintain the previous height limits or increase the height limits. I think, I just think it, you know, I do think there needs to be some level of respect for public, you know, for democracy from developers, no matter developers that have more of a social and environmental conscience. And so for those reasons, I think this is, you know, I mean, some developers come in and say, you know, trade this off for, you know, a height increase above the preferred height limits of 1 or 2 metres. Even then, I think that's, you know, used as a precedent. If this goes through, then every other developer along the strip will go for similar increases to heights above the height limits. I know we don't have mandatory heights, and I'm particularly angry with the state government for refusing to let us have mandatory height limits. But I just think, you know, we do need to draw the line as a council.
Thank you, Councillor Bolton. Any other councillors that would like to speak? I'd just like to close by just stating my support for the development, for the proposal. I'm really impressed with the building materials, and especially the fact that we don't have to consider some of the things that we have done in the past where we're looking at a building which has the height, so I think it was 10 stories, which has a flammable cladding on it that then actually had a fire in it. So I think that while there's a lot to consider about this, including the issue of what might have been, which would have been more cars and more parking and more traffic along that busy, congested neighbourhood, we now have an opportunity where we've seen that people have shown they can make a commitment to not owning cars in this neighbourhood, in these type of developments. Council, as part of its more integrated transport strategy, will be rolling out the parking restrictions that should protect residents of the other side of the tracks, with a view to managing all of the developments that do have car parks, which mean more traffic that we have seen recently. But I think that the fact that the building looks good, is going to feel good to live in, has green walls everywhere. I mean, that area, what it might look like and what it does look like are significant to me, because I see just lots of greenery when I ride down there. That little tight corner on Albion at Anstey Station is, like, you're kind of not really safe to ride. You have to go really, really slowly. So the fact that pedestrians can get off that path and scoot across and get into the station, the fact that that's all going to be lit, the fact that there's access all the way through back, ultimately it'll end up connecting through to Sydney Road and, you know, the area with the new park. And this, I think that this neighbourhood is going to be something that one day when I'm not a mayor anymore and people say you were on the council when A, B and C happened, this is one of the things that I'll be able to definitely live with. And so I'm happy to support it.
I'd like to close it.
Yep. Thank you. 2 minutes.
Thank you. Just wanted to just raise one more issue, and that is, given this construction is quite closely along the upfield bike path, we have had issues before in terms of access for people as they continue to travel up and down that path. So just call out to the developer to work closely with council to maintain access for people along the upfield bike path.
Great. So that's the end of the debate. I'll put it to the vote. All those in favour? Against? And I wonder if I can call for a division, please. So all those in favour? Councillors Yildiz, Martin, Afanli, Abood and Davidson? Davidson? Sorry. And against? Councillors Bolton and Tapanos. So we'll now move to the officer for to outline what will happen next.
Thank you. Council has decided to issue a notice of decision to grant a planning permit subject to the conditions contained in the officer recommendation. Any objectors now have 28 days should they wish to lodge a review with the VCAT. Similarly, the applicant has 60 days should they wish to appeal any of the conditions. Thank you.
Thank you. Could we grab Councillor Dorney from outside the room? Thank you. So the next item this evening will be DCF 2919, 21 to 23 and 25 Sydney Road, Coburg, planning application MPS 2017-988. And I'll now move to the officers to present the report.
Thank you. So this is an application at 21 to 23 and 25 Sydney Road in Coburg. The subject site's located in an activity centre zone. It's covered by a parking overlay and development contribution plan overlay. In terms of the strategic policy setting, it's located in an area where significant housing growth is recommended, and the subject site's pointed on the map shown at the southern end of the activity centre in Coburg. The built form guidance for the subject site is for an 18 metre overall height, an 11 metre street wall to Sydney Road, a 7 metre upper level setback to Sydney Road and a 3 metre upper level setback to Allen Street. Aerial photograph of the subject site and the surrounds is up on the screen. We can see it's near the corner of Sydney Road and Moreland Road, and it's within 150 metres from Moreland train station. Some photos of the subject site. On the left is the view of the frontage to Sydney Road, and on the right is the rear of the site. The proposal before us is for a 6-storey building that contains 4 shops and 27 dwellings. The dwellings contain a mixture of 1, 2 and 3 bedrooms. There's 38 car parking spaces proposed and 64 bike parking spaces. The image on the screen is the view from Sydney Road. On the screen now is the Allen Street elevation, showing the street wall and the upper level above, upper levels above the street wall, and the ground floor shops. The key pedestrian entrance is from Allen Street. There's 4 shops on the ground floor. Access to the vehicles is through the laneway that goes into a basement below, where there's a range of car spaces, some in-car stackers. Above are apartments that front either Allen Street or Sydney Road, and that design repeats as we go up the building. But above the street wall, the upper level set back to Allen Street and Sydney Road, as shown on that plan. The application was advertised and 8 objections were received. The key issues were the height, overlooking, overshadowing, the appearance of the building and car parking concerns. There was a planning information and discussion meeting that was held on the 15th of October 2018. Following that meeting, the applicant formally amended the proposal and reduced the height from a 7-storey building to a 6-storey building, which is a subject of the plan that we're considering tonight. It increased some of the setbacks of balconies from Sydney Road at levels 4 and 5, and it improved the design resolution of the building. A key consideration is that the street wall height and the upper level setbacks are considered satisfactory and comply with recommendation of the preferred guidelines within the planning scheme. The car parking and the bike parking is considered satisfactory, given the location of the site being so close to the train station and tram, that the slight reduction in the car parking for the shops is considered acceptable. The increase in height, there's a condition of the officer's recommendation to increase the floor-to-ceiling heights from 2.55 metres to 2.7 metres to improve the daylight and amenity for future occupants, and also to increase the ground floor height to 3.6 metres for the for the shop tenancies. That would increase the overall height to 19 metres above the 18 metre preferred height for this precinct of the activity centre zone. It's considered that 1 metre difference will be largely imperceivable. There's also a condition to include a communal rooftop terrace and some screening measures to improve the overlooking. So it's recommended that a notice of decision to grant a planning permit be issued with the key conditions that I've just explained before, as well as some other conditions, including adding a plinth to the ground floor shop facade and some extra screens to the west-facing capital room windows. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any objectors or submitters who would like to speak to this application? Yep. Come forward. Let us know who you are and go for it.
Good evening, councillors. My name is Dr. Christopher Henschke. I live on 1 Allen Street. I am an objector. Right, briefly, I must say that I'm not against progressive and well-designed developments per se, but this, of course, we objected to the original plan because it was so badly designed. There were so many errors that we pointed out. Some of them have been partially addressed. I'm just going to go through a few that I don't believe have been addressed well enough. For starters, it fails to say that our place is a residential place. It says it's a commercial building. That was changed, to my knowledge, in August 2016, we notified the council of that. Apparently the file had been lost previous to then. Now, personally, regarding the laneway and our house and the rear of this development, we found that the rear setback is not sort of acknowledged here. In the Moreland planning scheme, it says, for building height 3 to 8 stories, a rear setback must be 6 metres from the lane centre line to living rooms or main balconies. Now, on the plans, it points out that there's a setback of 3 metres and something like 1 centimetre to bedrooms, but there are main living rooms within 3 metres of that, so that's incorrect. Also, the activity centre zoning, as was pointed out, the maximum height is again over by a metre. Funnily enough, in a previous application, which was from 2012 or something, the original plans were for 4 stories, and then it went up to 7, and then it's 6. So we believe it's still too high. Also, just on a note for us, I think our private amenity will be still severely affected by the overshadowing. We have also concerns regarding the noise, and we have been talking to Andy Wilson quite a bit about this car lift device. The acoustic report in here sort of fails to kind of list anything that might affect the neighbours. It just talks about what may happen to the people in the place. I'll just get to my notes here. The car lifts, as it says in a document that was released from the council recently, car lifts are included in EPA noise regulations. This has not been kind of addressed in this document. The Moreland Council Noise Information Sheet Clause 52.06 says one should source a quiet car stacker and add sound dampening or enclosing areas which have car stackers.
I just need to ask you to get towards wrapping it up.
Look,
thank you.
At this point, it's an open perforated grille. We are really concerned about the noise coming out of this. There's also going to be a lot of noise regarding cars coming in and out. I believe the EPA noise regulations prohibit sort of domestic or industrial noise that happens sort of between 11 p.m. and 7 a.m. So does that mean the car stacker won't be used then? There are also other issues regarding cars coming in and out of the alley, which I suspect maybe one of the other people will talk about.
Thank you.
Yep.
Thank you.
Angela Trotter, I live in Allen Street. I'm an objector. First off, just on some technical points, the plans that have been submitted and distributed by council are actually only for 21 to 23 Sydney Road. 25 is not included in the labelling at all. So is it 21 to 23 or 21 to 23 and 25? Because that's not what's listed on the plans. The plans still show in the surrounding areas that there are what are labelled concrete parking areas surrounding the development. They're all private property. They're not concrete parking areas, they're private property. One of those is in fact a fenced-in backyard. So the accuracy, which has been discussed and clearly hasn't been addressed. It was discussed at the PID meeting, which we never got any feedback from, we never got any updates from until the end of last week, which is pretty slack, really. The proposal outlines plans for a 6-storey building. Unfortunately, the plans submitted only go to level 5. There is no 6th floor in the plans. So these are all just important, but the development, as already mentioned, exceeds the height restriction by a metre. One of the recommendations is that a rooftop garden be reinstated, which will only increase the height of the building. So it'll be more than a metre above what the recommendations are. And once the rooftop garden is instituted, then that infringes on the privacy of the residents in the house next door. They'll be looking directly into their garden. Currently, because they're only recommendations, we haven't been told whether they've been approved or not yet, 81% of the apartments are currently non-compliant to clause 58.07-2, room depth objective, nor is the ground floor. So whilst the report suggests that these are recommendations, there's absolutely nothing there that says they've been undertaken or agreed to. As far as traffic goes, Allen Street's already extremely congested, particularly at peak hour. Cars are parked halfway down the street, just trying to turn the corner into Cameron Street. So you're saying you're adding an extra 350 car movements a day and it won't make any impact. I don't know where you got your numbers from, but clearly no one's ever been to Allen Street. Public transport in that area is completely stretched beyond its limits. It's completely overburdened already. You can't get on the number 19 tram. You usually have to wait for 2 or 3 trams to go by in quick succession before you can even fit in. Same goes for the Upfield Line train. So it's already overburdened. And you're saying, oh, you can manage. I just don't understand where you got that from. As far as car parking, of course there'll be visitors and there'll be people parking in the streets. It's already poorly monitored by Moreland Council. Moreland Council loses, when I actually count them, up on $2,000 a week on infringements that aren't given. So now you're going to increase it and you're still not going to be monitoring it. So that's an impact on the residents and it's an impact on the amenity. And the laneway, which is referred to as of no safety issues with it, it's used every day by pedestrians and by cars. And I can tell you, I walk past it every day and at least once a week I'm almost run down by a car. And that's with the current traffic. And now you're looking to add all of this. It's just, and you can't actually see around the corner to visualise cars coming. So it's a real safety issue for pedestrians. And that would be something that has been addressed as being not an issue, but I'm afraid it is a huge issue.
I've got to hit the bell, sorry.
No.
Thank you. Time flies, doesn't it? Okay, anybody else? Thank you.
Hi, my name is Pieta. I live on Allen Street and I'm an objector. And we were just wondering if we could have a CPM on site.
Independent.
An independent CPM. CMP. Sorry.
Acronyms get you every time.
Yeah.
Can I ask that question? Are there any other people who would like to speak to the application? And then I suspect there'll be some questions. Mr. Dolby. CMP.
Yeah, apologies, speaking twice. Nick Dolby, West Brunswick. It's a mixed area. I know this area. I know people who own a residential house in the street. I know people who live around the corner. It's a very mixed area. It's residential, it's retail, and it's industrial. Museum of Victoria.
Sorry, Angela, just because you were... Yeah, no, but as the chair of the meeting, what I need to do is I need to allow everyone to have their say, as you were... Nick, as you were allowed to have your say, and then...
We can come back to that, can we?
It's not a discussion. You've put your piece forward and people may disagree with some of what you've said. And
I'm not sure what I made up.
That's okay. Continue to put your case forward, please.
Yes, I am a little bit upset though, because yes, I know people in the area and it's a mixed area. Residential, retail, industrial. There's a major Melbourne museum facility in Allen Street. There are dancing places. There are people doing business. Coffee roasting shops, etc., etc. I do want to thank the planning staff for increasing the awnings on Sydney Road and on Allen Street. Allen Street is an important street for pedestrian movements. It feeds Moreland Railway Station. So having awnings on Allen Street is a significant improvement in the streetscape. I'd also like to thank the applicants for providing a number of shops in their development, not one big floor, but several smaller shops which are more likely to succeed in the South Coburg, North Brunswick retail environment. Car stackers, Mark Higginbotham, We need stuff, more stuff. We need a better policy. We need a policy on car stackers. We haven't got it yet. Where is it? Roof gardens improve the amenity of cities. Cities with roof gardens are a better place to live. They're a greener place to live. There's less heating from the roof onto the underlying things. It makes a better community. And finally, the laneway. That laneway does get used. It's the south end of the laneway is a major bus stop at Moreland Road. And there's a lot of pedestrian traffic around the south end of that laneway. I think we may need to look at that laneway for traffic calming measures. That's all I've got to say.
Thank you, Mr. Dolby. Are there any other objectors or submitters who would like to speak to the application? If you two are going to have a fight, can you go out of the gallery, please? Thank you. Could I please have a representative from the applicant or the applicant? Thank you very much. Come forward.
Good evening, Mayor and councillors. My name is Equin from Time Architects, representing the client. The subject site is located in the Coburg, heart of Coburg, just off Moreland Road, on Sydney Road, less than 100 metres away from the Moreland train station. Tram right on the front along Sydney Road. The proposal takes full advantage of its location. All the apartments has unstructured northern orientation to its balconies and living space. Along the ground floor, we also propose to activate not just Sydney Road, but also all the way down along the side of Allen Street, the whole length of our properties, which in line with the council expectation and guidelines. The proposal itself, the apartment and the amenity of each apartment itself has been checked, double-checked by the council. Prior to this meeting, we have worked very hard with Andy, the council officer, to try to accommodate all the recommendation that is listed in the report today. The actual latest plan, maybe there's some confusion because the previous application is only 21 and 23. Then the client has acquired 25 and then it's become 21 to 25. We have worked, the latest plan that we have worked and submitted to the council, but not formally substitute because there's not enough time because of this meeting. We have increased the floor to ceiling height to 2.7 as per recommendation and be able to reduce it down to 18.33. So the reason we're here tonight is only because we're encroaching past the preferred height limit by 33 centimetres. The preferred height limit is actually allowed rooftop, garden, and the lift overrun to encroach that 18 metre, and therefore the council recommendation is to have the rooftop garden reinstated and so on. We believe that these proposals tick all the boxes and therefore should be granted the permit as per council recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillors, questions?
I've got one in regards to heritage. Now, I know Sydney Road is a heritage precinct and the nearby single story facades, they have a heritage overlay, and should we be looking at a sympathetic response for the heritage nature of Sydney Road? I think if we could get the screen up, that slide that actually shows the elevation and setbacks on Sydney Road, it would be helpful. Yeah, that one. I'm interested, I mean, we talk about the frontage on Sydney Road being 10 metres or so to comply with the heritage area of it. And further south, it certainly is to about 10 metre heights, but here we're looking at a street frontage that's single story. So I think it's probably detracting from the heritage of that area, but I'm keen to know if there was such a heritage report or some consideration given because it's not mentioned in the report.
So page 126, if you'd like to read.
Councillor Bolton? Couple of questions to the applicant about the some of the points which were made by the first objector. I was wondering if you might be able to respond to some of those, in particular around the noise abatement around the car stacker, because I couldn't find really much about that in the report. And the other thing, unless I've misread things, is it 5 stories plus a rooftop garden, which makes 6 stories, or is 6 stories plus a rooftop garden? Because in the report I could only see 5 stories, plans for 5 stories as well.
It's 6-storey.
6 stories, so plus a rooftop garden, but there's no 6-story included within the plan. So if I missed a page.
I'm not sure what's been included in
on the report.
So I just want to clarify something here. Level 5 is the 6th story. So
Yeah, ground
it's
plus
ground, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So 5 is the 6th level. Does that make sense?
Yes.
So ground is the first floor.
Okay, so the American system.
Well, I don't know where that system comes from. But either way, there are plans for all 6 levels. The confusion is that the ground floor is the first level, and then 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 is the 6th level.
Okay,
So it's easy
you're right.
for that
You're right,
to have
sorry.
happened. But there were some other questions that you asked then as well. So
About
the
the
noise
car stack.
abatement, yeah.
So the car stack itself is located inside the building in the underground basement to start off. So what you're probably referring to is car lift that bring all the cars down. So that obviously will be designed to the code. So with the BCA will govern that. So we will have to decide to the Building Code of Australia anyway. So that will get covered once it's gone to the construction phase.
But shouldn't that be worked out at this stage, because you have to...
To be honest with you, to be honest with you, all the car lift that is currently on the market, they've complied with the noise level anyway. I mean, otherwise you wouldn't be able to use it.
Sorry, we're not having a backwards and forwards conversation. This is just one of the joys of being the chair of this type of a meeting, is that there are lots of conversations that want to be had, and some that may be had later and have been had, but we just can't have this dialogue backwards and forwards. I suspect there are probably still questions from the councillors. And just to clarify, Councillor Tapp, I'll come back to you, Councillor Bolton.
Yeah, I didn't get my answer question.
Yeah, so it actually says there is no...
I know it says, I could read it, but it was there a report done nonetheless. I mean, it says that, it would not have an adverse impact on the heritage value of the property. I mean, whose opinion is that? Was there a heritage study conducted on the site?
Thank you.
So the subject site's not covered by a heritage overlay, nor is the adjacent site. So for that reason, there's no requirement for a heritage study or report to be submitted with this application.
Thank you. And I think it's worth adding, because Councillor Tapanos, you couldn't be with us on Monday, we did talk about some of the detail of the design has been changed slightly so that it's a bit more sympathetic to the other buildings in the street. And before, that whole bottom floor was what looked like what's called floating, and those plinths have been added to be more sympathetic to the nature of the design of those older buildings that are in the street. And I think it's also worth noting that the building right on the corner looks like it was maybe built in the 70s or 80s, so it already is out of character with some of the older buildings that are in the street that you're probably referring to. Councillor Farnley?
Is there an independent CMP?
Thank
Something
you.
like answered.
Thank you.
So with the construction management plans, they're dealt with at Moreland through the general local law.
That's after this process, right?
That's correct.
Great.
Okay. Thank you. Councillor Bolton? Thank you.
Yes, I'm just wondering about the situation of loading bay. So 4 shops. Usually it isn't, there's no clear idea as to what sort of shops which will be located, like what sort of the nature of the shops will be. But I'm really annoyed by the fact that there's another development with no loading bay. Now, I know the report says that there will be adequate car parking for the shops to take, for vehicles to load and unload. I'm not sure if that's cars or trucks. But, there's already a shortage of loading bays, and it is a health and safety issue for truck drivers, especially, depending on the nature of the business of these shops, to have to travel, walk long distances with heavy loads to access shops. There's many developments, unfortunately, that are waiving, loading zones when they've got commercial at the bottom. So I'd like to see the design modified to include a proper loading bay to accommodate trucks of some, that might be the size that would be likely to be delivering to these shops.
So, Edwin, would you be able to just approach is that your name, sorry?
Yes.
Yeah, approach the podium again. I think what Councillor Bolton is asking, if there is an opportunity for you to take back that request about installing a loading bay. Is there any reason why, from an officer perspective, that couldn't be looked at?
I can just address in relation to that question of loading. It's on page 15 of the report. So while there's car stackers proposed for the residential properties, the shops don't have car stackers, so they're at-grade car parking.
Yes.
And our traffic engineer was satisfied that that offers enough opportunity for the future operators of the shops to be able to do loading and unloading from the at-grade car spaces. And the occasional larger trucks could be accommodated on the street.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. Are there any other questions that anyone feels they'd like to ask?
Just because I'm curious.
Yep.
I don't think I should be asking this, but potentially to the applicant, through the Mayor, we had a similar application just before with 0 car parking in a similar location from Sydney Road, just a block, maybe a block and a half away. What's some of the justification behind the car parking provided in this application? Yeah.
Thank you.
I suppose the short answer would be the nature of the actual site is totally different. So while the previous application, the vehicle has to travel 70 odd meters, this is a short distance through the lane from Allen Street. So therefore, I suppose it's a different sort of situation. And therefore, we are able to provide car park for future residents, and we think that it should be provided. And we also be mindful that we also provide the bicycle parking as well, so that they have that option. Yeah.
Thank you. Okay.
Can I just ask?
Yes, please do.
Okay.
Yep.
One for officers, just around, it states in the report with the conditions around good compliance with setbacks, but one of the objectives tonight has talked about some of the rear setbacks being inadequate. Are you able to talk to that a little bit? Yep.
So the purpose of the policy in relation to that aspect is in relation to the outlooks of the dwellings, and the outlooks of the dwellings front the street. So in relation to that, the setbacks comply with the planning scheme.
Thank you.
Can I follow? Sorry, can I follow up on that? Dr. Henschke commented that one was a living room. So
Yes, with a balcony. On the left there.
So on the left there's a balcony that fronts onto Allen Street. So the primary outlook of that dwelling is to Allen Street.
And can we just confirm, when you say primary, is there no outlook from that little corner down that way? Will there be some kind of screen or something, or which would satisfy that overlooking on that side?
The setbacks of the planning scheme are not in relation to the overlooking issue. It's about daylight and mass.
Oh, yeah.
The overlooking issues are a separate issue, but are also dealt with in the report, but are not the sole reason for the purpose of the setbacks. The primary outlook of those dwellings do front Allen Street, and that's what the policy is determining.
Yeah.
Okay, just one for the representative of the applicant. Clause 58.35 of the scheme talks about encouraging development that promotes climate responsive landscape treatment, and that's to support thermal comfort and urban heat island effect, as well as increase amenity. Given that it's currently reconditioned to reinstate the green roof, but beyond half of what it was originally proposed at. The clause 58.35 talks about supporting developments that have green roofs and green walls, and I'm just wondering if the applicant might be amenable to looking at a green wall for this development, given the reduction in the green roof space?
Yeah, that's possible. The green roof was reduced. It was reduced after the consultation because of the problem with the overlooking and a lot of concern about overlooking from the actual green roof itself. And therefore we sort of come to a conclusion that we might reduce the size of it marginally. But yeah, there's no problem with introducing green wall.
Thank you. Did you have a question? Are there any other questions from councillors? Okay, so I'll need to ask for a motion from the councillors, please.
I'm happy to move the officer recommendations with a few slight amendments.
Thank you, Councillor Donnelly. Would you like to outline the amendments?
Sorry, Saskia, thank you. It's okay. Condition, I'm not sure what number that is, but a level or ramped entry to ensure each shop is accessible, and then an additional
4C.
4C, a green landscape wall for the north Allen Street elevation, including details of irrigation and any other specifications required to ensure the success of the landscaping.
And a seconder? Councillor Martin?
Yes, so thanks everyone for coming tonight, and thanks to the objectors for being part of the process. This is never easy, and I feel that on balance the objections both that have been detailed and worked through during the process as well as what we've heard tonight with some additional clarification, have been ameliorated as far as possible in terms of what the acceptable outcomes that a planning scheme that we have to abide by is, has set. I feel that this is an acceptable outcome for the area, being compliant to the state and local planning policies for an activity centre where we're... Am I talking just to the amendments, or can I talk to the whole thing?
You can talk to the whole thing.
Okay, good. Okay.
You've moved the motion with those amendments.
Okay, good. All right. So being in an activity centre, we're encouraging significant growth in these areas where there's excellent access to public transport. I realise that our public transport is overloaded, but that's not something that can be part of an assessment within a planning application, and I highly encourage you to speak to state members and to complain to PTV about an overloaded public transport system. We know that needs to be improved. But generally it does have good access to alternative forms of transport. I think that it responds well to the urban context and has a high level of compliance with this activity centre in relation to height, street wall and setbacks. I think that's given the conditions that officers and the applicant or representative of the applicant have worked through. I like the removal of the additional floor, but I'm glad to see that the rooftop garden has been retained. I think it does create a really nice additional source of amenity for residents living there. I also am supportive of the additional 1 metre just to really be able to enhance the livability of those apartments through a little bit of extra floor to ceiling heights, and I thank officers and the applicant for that. I think there's I like to see that there's going to be further solar PV work and increases there. I think that I really encourage more than 5 kilowatt system for something of that size, and I look forward to seeing how that progresses. I think there's a good mix of apartment sizes have been accommodated for, and the overall response to issues. I realise everyone's not ever going to get what they want, but in terms of an activity centre and what we need to assess an application on around the planning scheme, that this is an acceptable, which is the key word that we need to work with, acceptable outcome. I think ESD, I'd like to see it go above and beyond, but in terms of what the actual planning scheme is requiring, it's above the minimum for that. So I commend the applicant on that.
Thank you, Councillor Donnelly. Councillor Martin?
Yeah. So, I mean, the amended plans are much better than what was originally submitted, and I thank the officers for really putting in a lot of work with the applicant over quite an amount of time to actually get these plans to what Councillor Dorney stated, which is an acceptable outcome. Achieves the mid-rise outcomes sought from the scheme. I'm happy with the officer recommendations, making the building comply with section 5807. The addition of the plinths is also really good for the amenity and the visual appeal of the building. I think the additional amendments are great, making sure that the stores are accessible and fully accessible, don't have a tiny little step in the way. Adding in the elements of the green wall, the green roof, rainwater tank, 7.5 star NABERS rated building. I think that all of these things are elements of what we're looking for in development along Sydney Road. I note that this does have car parking and this does have vehicles moving in and out. I ideally would like to have seen that reduced a little bit more. Allen Street is a thoroughfare, and I encourage officers to work with residents to look at some traffic calming measures on that street, because there is definitely a bit of a rat run happening, and we've seen in other parts of our city where we have rat runs that elements of our new transport strategy will be able to be rolled out to actually slow some of that traffic or completely discourage the through rat running there. So I look forward to some further changes happening in and around that area. But all in all, it's an acceptable outcome, and I think
from where the application was to where it is now, it will be a nice building for people in the area.
Thank you, Councillor Martin. Are there any councillors that would like to speak against the application? Councillor Tapanos?
Thank you. Again, may I begin by acknowledging some of the good stuff in this, and I do think the housing mix is good, and I think that we do need housing diversity. And so I'm glad to see they're not all one bedders, so most of the two, there's a couple of threes. I mean, I disagree with my fellow councillors. In the case of car parking, I think it's great that you've provided the car parking. So I do think that it is something that the people who are renting or buying into these apartments would want to see. I'll tell you what I don't like, and that's car stackers. That won't come to a surprise to most people here. I just think they're pointless. Residents don't use them. And I do think they are noisy. And I think that there's a lot of policy work that needs to go in and around the issue of car parking, stackers and noise and so forth. So the issue though, and the reason why I'm not supporting this, and it is a small one, but for me an important one, and I note that yes, we've heard your advice that it's not, there's no heritage overlay on this site or the adjoining site, but I still think, councillors, when you have a look at our municipality, its history, its urban history, its built form, the biggest gift of our municipality is Sydney Road. What we promote is our Sydney Road urban heritage, its facades, and the history and the culture that comes with that. And the street wall, as I said in my question, is predominantly that 10-metre height because that's what some of those heritage facades have, the double story, and it should be aligned with them. I take the view here that the setback that kicks in at level 4, at the very least should kick in at level 3. The street wall should stop in and around at the same height as the adjoining facade, which doesn't have a heritage overlay, but is clearly Federation, 100 plus years, 20s. There's clearly historical aesthetic value that needs to be protected. And overlay or not, this is a serious consideration for me. And I think it's only a small change to say that the step back should kick in at a level earlier to remove some of that visual bulk, some of that interference with the urban heritage facades, which is the key asset in our municipality. So I don't think it's a big change. I don't think it's a change that could be done tonight because it requires redesign of the apartments. So I say, vote this down. Let's work with the applicants. Let's get that change, and let's come back sometime in the future with a better application. Because we start allowing things like this to get through, we would have a Sydney Road that has just lost its charm and lost its facades, and they'll be hidden behind, overshadowed and hidden behind these concrete slabs. They may have a green wall, but I mean, for me, it's insufficient still.
Thank you, Councillor Tapanos. Okay, are there any other councillors who would like to speak to this application? Councillor Farnley.
Thank you everyone for coming along. Really appreciate the feedback we get from residents as well. In terms of process, some of the key insights that I've heard tonight from residents was in regards to height and overlooking of neighbouring buildings, the noise of the car stacker and issues around traffic in that area. There are 27 conditions that the council officers are putting on this permit application in addition to the permit application, so an additional 27 conditions. And a lot of those conditions will actually address some of the concerns that you've raised tonight, and that's the reason why I'll be supportive of the council officers' conditioned permit. I'm quite comfortable with the process, and in terms of the reason why this application is even here, because it didn't actually reach the amount of objections required, is because the council officers wanted to improve the amenity within the rooms to increase them from 2.55 height to 2.7, far more livable spaces and habitable space for people to live in, and now it's gone over by 1 metre. But I'd rather have it to be far more livable than cramped, smaller spaces. That's the only reason why it's here, because it's gone over by 1 metre because of that improved condition for those rooms. In addition to that, I'm comfortable that during the PID process, we've gone from 7 stories to 6 stories. We've reduced the size of the rooftop garden. So there's a lot of improvements that have happened to address those concerns that have been raised. And because of that, I'm quite comfortable to support the application. I'd rather support this than risk this going to VCAT without any of the conditions that the council officer are putting in, which are 27 of them. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor O'Farnley. I think we're ready to put this to the vote. So all those in favour? Against? Declare that carried. Now, throw to the officers to outline what will happen next. Sorry? Yeah.
So council have resolved to issue a notice of decision to grant a planning permit in accordance with the alternate recommendation put on the screen. The notice of decision will be issued to the applicant and objectors. The objector parties will have 28 days in which to appeal the decision, and the applicant will have 60 days in which to appeal any conditions of the permit. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Are there any urgent business items to consider tonight? No, none on the agenda. So that concludes the business we have this evening. Councillors, members of the gallery, and to our viewers live streaming at home, I declare the council meeting for planning and related matters closed at 8:05. Thank you.